Hey, everybody, and welcome. My name is Rob Phelan, also known as the FI Educator Online. We are going to be talking today about the entire process of getting a car and the tips and tricks that you can use to help you get a better deal, to avoid mistakes in your purchases that will stay with you for years. We'll talk a little bit about financing. We'll talk about finding the right car for you. It's going to be a wealth of information. And I'm going to be joined today by Vivian Liu, who is an absolute auto expert. She's worked within the auto industry and outside of it and has founded her own company called Making Auto Easy, which is designed to help empower women through the auto buying process.
Hi, Rob. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I want to go to your mission statement for Making Auto Easy, empowering women in the car buying journey. Why are you focusing on women?
Yeah, I mean, if any of you have purchased a car before, surely you know it's not the most pleasant car or most pleasant buying journey overall experience, but it's actually a lot worse for women. So if you were to ask your parents or your grandparents, I'm pretty sure they'll tell you the same thing. Really, it's that when you walk into the dealership, there's this knowledge gap because they're sales equipped and they know all the product, they have all the information, and for most people, they don't know a lot about cars. So then they commonly feel like they're being disrespected, talked down to. A lot of times, if you're going in there with your partner, oftentimes they're talking to your husband instead of talking to you when it's your vehicle and your money trying to purchase your own car. So we're trying to empower women to understand their car buying options. And the reason why we focused on women outside of just my own pure personal experiences, but women actually purchase the majority of all cars. And women influence 85% of car purchasing decisions. So if that's the case, why is it that 90% of women wouldn't go to a dealership without a man? And 2 out of 3 stated that they don't know where to start when it comes to actually buying a car. So it's a really big gap in this type of experience. So we wanted to fix that.
Yeah, it's I think a very traditionally male-dominated industry in terms of people who will work at a dealership, who work within the sales and the shop side of it. And then it always felt like such a male-dominated idea to buy a car, to own a car. But as you said, women are hugely influential in the car buying decision process. And we've seen the stats in modern times. Women are making more and more money. They're becoming more and more the high income earner within a household. Plenty of women are on their own and need to make car buying decisions by themselves. So I love that you are helping to bridge that gap and helping to empower women to make these decisions that we should all feel comfortable making. And hopefully on the sales side, we're starting to learn more as well about how we're treating people and using equality and how we approach people too. But that we can't control right here, at least.
Yeah.
But we can't control the buying side. So how do you empower people to make better car buying decisions? So what does Making Auto Easy do for people?
Yeah, I found through interviewing, hundreds of women, just car shoppers in general, it is that knowledge that we're missing. When you're more equipped with the understanding of your options and how much it costs and what it should not cost, you're in a much better position to then go negotiate. And when you get into the dealership and you're looking at numbers and you're looking at all this paperwork with information that you've never seen before, it's very easy to miss things that would normally be a red flag to people that understand how to read those invoices. So I find that when we teach people to be more prepared with what steps are about to happen, how to read the information, how to understand that jargon, they walk into that dealership dangerous because they know more than the salesperson, and they have no choice but to treat them with the respect that they deserve. So the way that we help them right now is we built a recommendation engine that helps people understand their car buying options so that they can pick and choose the right car. Because what I've noticed working in the industry is that all of these automotive services, they really focus on pushing you to look at inventory and getting you into the hands of dealerships as fast as possible because that's how they make money. So it's not a very unbiased solution. Like even Auto Trader, for example, the first 10 pieces of inventory that you see are paid for by dealerships. So that doesn't mean those are the right vehicles for you. So oftentimes I see people making an uninformed decision in a hurry because they were delaying or they have to make a decision really quickly. So what we really want to do is make sure that if you're trying to buy a car, you know what all your options are. Through our recommendation engine, we can narrow down your options from 1,500 different car combinations to 6 vehicles that we build just for you.
Okay, so a couple of big things in here. And I think your personal finance class, if you're sitting in one right now, has a very similar mindset. We are equipping you to make better decisions through understanding the jargon and the nuts and bolts of personal finance, but also how to make decisions when you're using that information and how to understand what's happening to you in terms of advertising and marketing and all the things that are trying to influence your buying decisions. Okay, so if you are joining us live, welcome. And if you have questions throughout this process, please put them in the chat window, or your teacher can put them in on your behalf. We're going to break this talk up into 3 different parts. The first is going to be before you go to a dealership or to buy a car. The second is what you do when you're there. And the third is what you might do afterwards. And then at the very end, if there's any other questions we haven't answered yet, we will try and get those in as well. So get your questions in at any point, and we will try and answer them whenever is appropriate in the talk. You should have a reflection sheet that looks something like this. The first question is, if you were to go to buy a car right now, so you're starting the process right now before Vivian and I talk, what would you do? How would you approach it? What do you know already about car buying? And then we can start seeing, are you on the right track? Are there things you can add to your strategy? Are there things that we need to watch out for and remove? Because maybe that was a misconception about how the car buying process worked. So this should be a great conversation for you, particularly us teenagers who are either just made our first car purchase or we have one coming up soon. And even if you do have a car already, maybe it's an older car, it's like, this is only going to get me through a couple of years, so I'm going to do this again very soon. So it should be very relevant for all of us. I'm excited to dig into this. Vivian, you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So before we start, so we're like, okay, I want to buy a car. And you mentioned already that decision time is an important factor. If you have to buy a car tomorrow, that's very different to, yeah, I want to buy a car in the next month or 2. How can we kind of prepare ourselves for this car buying decision moment?
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that are going on in the car market that maybe people are not aware of. Surely you might have heard that there's a shortage of cars in the world right now, and that's due to a microprocessor shortage. So that means there's a lot less new cars, which has made used cars really valuable in the last couple of years. So now there's also a shortage of new cars and used cars, and car prices are inflated. So that makes it a little bit tougher for a lot of people. On top of that, you throw that interest rates are inflated right now as well. So there's a lot of reasons why people are having a hard time buying a car. And when you're going to buy a used one, you're likely going to be paying more for it now than you would have a couple of years to go. And that's something that changes on a monthly, even weekly basis. And it depends on the type of vehicle that you're looking for. So I think what you have to do is you have to come to terms with what it is that you're looking for. And you have to understand the options and how those two meet. So even just to go at a very basic level, I think people need to understand that there's obviously new cars, used cars, but there's also certified pre-owned cars. They're called CPO vehicles. They're basically new-ish, gently used vehicles that are recertified to be a high-quality used car, and new dealerships will sell those vehicles. So those are your options, because generally when you buy a used car, it's either you want something that's like a very beater because it's your very first car and you're going to spend like $10,000 or less on it, and there's risks and things that are associated to that, or you want to spend a good amount of money because you want to keep the vehicle until it's going to die. So understanding when you go into the shopping market, there's a lot of information, a lot of terminology. So I want to make sure people understand it, that there was a difference and there's pros and cons to each. And I think just in general, understanding the different types of vehicles out there, because it is a finance class, I do want to reiterate that, you know, a vehicle, a car is not there. It's not a house, right? It is a depreciating asset, which means when you purchase the vehicle, the value of it goes down immediately. And especially for cars, the stats show that when you drive the vehicle off of the lot, talking about a brand new car, you're losing 11% of depreciation value. So that means your car is worth 11% less than it was when you just drove it from the dealership. And that's why a lot of people like used cars, because a lot of that depreciation has happened. But again, when you're buying a used car, you're also taking risks because someone else has owned it before. The older the vehicle is, the more likely it'll have problems, the more maintenance it'll require. It's just the reality of how things are, less fuel efficient, things like that. And if you're the type of person that wants a BMW, you have to also understand that there are things associated to that. Although it's awesome and looks really cool, it's very sporty, the BMW, a 3 Series, for example, it'll lose like 40% of its value in like 5 to 6 years, whereas a Honda Civic will only lose maybe somewhere under 20% in 5 years. So the type of vehicle that you're looking for is going to impact your financial decision currently, and then what it's going to look like when you go to sell it. So coming to terms with, am I looking to buy this vehicle for the long run, or am I going to have it for a couple of years and then want to sell it? Those are some of the things that I would want you to think about in advance before just going to go, shop around for a dealership. These things do impact, how you come out of the situation. And that's why I think it's really important.
Okay.
I'm
So
not sure if I veered away from that question.
no, that was perfect. That kind of hit a lot of the ones I was going to ask you about. So your options, you got new versus used. We have certified used. You could lease a car, which is that kind of other option that's typically I don't really recommend. Is there any situation where you think leasing a car is a good idea?
Yeah, I mean, there are situations where people really want to change new cars every single 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and it's completely an option. There's a lot of times where the great thing about so there, I'm not sure how much everyone knows about the different purchasing options, but you can purchase it cash, you can finance it, or you can lease it. Cash makes sense for some people, especially when they have a line of credit where the interest rate is lower on that line of credit. So if at the dealership or the bank, they're charging you 7%, but your line of credit is 3%. Well, some people will take the money out of their line of credit and then pay the car off entirely to the dealership, and then they'll just pay off the payments through the line of credit at a lower interest rate. So they're paying less overall. Financing, is the most case for a lot of people because most people don't have $50,000 or more sitting around. And then for leasing, you're essentially just paying for what you use. And you don't have to worry about what the value of your vehicle is at the very end of its term. You don't have to worry about that depreciating factor because it's already preset for you. And some of people see it as like a rent to buy type of situation where you can rent it for its time and then buy out the vehicle afterwards if you choose to, because that's an option of yours. Leasing makes sense for people who, again, really want to switch cars on a regular basis. There are times where leasing payments are less than finance ones. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It just depends on what you're looking to do. And if that's a good option for you. So there are people who own businesses at that stage. It makes sense for them. They want the newest vehicle. They need the newest vehicle for work, whatever it may be. Real estate agents, sometimes leasing makes sense for the business as well.
Okay. So there are some scenarios where having a new car might be part of your business or part of what you need. And then for others, it's just what you want. And we know with personal finance, there is no, you can't do this, you can do this. If you value having a brand new car all the time, then that's totally fine. But you just have to make sure that that fits your budget and you're able to create the space for that without compromising on the other things, such as paying yourself first, creating that emergency fund, investing for retirement, all the other goals that you have in life. You just don't want your car to suck away or take away from those, especially if a car isn't something you really care that much about. Like for me, like the idea of leasing a car would be a total waste of money to me because I don't care about my car. As long as it gets me from home to work, I really don't care what it looks like. If the heater works and the AC works, that's probably about all I need, and maybe a radio that works. That's about it. Which brings us up to like when you're choosing your make and model, like what do you actually need your car for? Must be a big question. I'm sure that's what goes into your algorithm when you're trying to help match people to cars. Like what kinds of questions do you ask them to help make that match process happen?
Yeah, so we want to understand things of your lifestyle. What is it that you want in that vehicle that's really important for you? And a lot of the customers that we deal with, they're a little bit older. I'd say 30 to 50 and above. So generally, they've had a vehicle that they're used to that they like and don't like. So there's things that are compared to their previous vehicle. Like now I have a second kid, so I need more space. So there's a lot of comparative things that we can learn from that. But it's also really important that we understand, where is it that you live? Do you live in California or do you live in Manitoba? Those are the things that are going to determine whether you need an all-wheel drive or front-wheel drive vehicle. That then also affects the price of your vehicle. There are things that we ask about, how much space it is that you need. What is your lifestyle? Like, are you going to be carrying skis? Are you going to be carrying a bike on the inside? Do you have a large dog? Do you need a 3-row because you're bringing your grandparents with you? Those are the things that are generally involved. So I would urge you to, sit and think about what you're going to need your vehicle for the next 5 to 8 years, if depending on how long you want that vehicle for, and really understand, what is it that's going to be important for you, but also the people that are going to be driving it with you or sitting in it with you. Because a lot of times, I'm 5'7", but my boyfriend is 5'2", 6'2". So then there's going to be different things. I can't fit him in a Chevrolet Spark, which is a very small vehicle, or like a Mini. So those are the things that you have to take into consideration as well. And that's going to help you in the long run.
And I love that advice. Just write down everything that you need a car for. If there's things you'd really like to have, like your wants list, put that down there too. Maybe rank the most important, least important to you. Needs are the ones we won't compromise on. Like we need these things to be there. Wants, it's nice to have them, but if we can't make it work within our budget, then we're like, okay, those are just kind of nice luxuries to have. And speaking of budgets, I want to throw a couple of stats out here from LendingTree. The average new car payment right now in the US is $716 per month. The average lease is $578 per month, and the average used car payment is $526 per month. Think about what you could do with that kind of money, everybody, first off, especially us teenagers out there who are like, that's a lot of money. Like that's more than I make in a month in some cases if you're doing like a part-time job a couple of days a week. You need to figure out what percentage of your budget you want to spend on your auto category. And the auto category is not just made up of the car price or the car payment. What goes into the total cost of car ownership, Vivian? What else do we have to think about when we're budgeting out for this thing?
Yeah. So definitely car payments is a big piece of it, but there's car insurance is a really important factor. You're going to have to pay a sales tax. There's a lot of things that are involved in that. You're obviously going to be paying interest if you're financing the vehicle. So there is more associated to that. Sometimes when people come to me, they say have a budget of $500. They're not considering some of those other things that are involved in that. And sometimes, especially as a new driver, your insurance is not going to be the same as someone who is 40, who's been driving for 20 years and has no accident. So you'll have to consider that you'll likely have, I'm not an expert on insurance, but you're going to have, they're going to rate you a little bit differently because you're more at risk due to your lack of experience driving. So insurance is a big part of that. I do also want to talk about, to your previous point about the payments and what your needs and your wants are. It's really important to identify that because I find that a lot of people that I work with, they really underestimate the cost of things. A lot of people want a sunroof or they want navigation. And those are things that are actually more available in higher trim levels. And trim levels are packages. So you've got a base trim, which is going to have the most basic things. And then the upper trim that has all the bells and whistles is what we call it. So it's really important to identify that, like, yeah, although I would love a sunroof, maybe if that sunroof was an extra $1,000 more, is it worth it to me? Those are the types of things that you'll come into because a lot of times we work with people who have to make that sacrifice because in the end, you realize it wasn't actually worth the money to them. It was just a nice to have.
Yeah. And if you try to custom build a car, it's going to cost you a lot more than buying one that's already been made. And you're just kind of saying like, yeah, I like this one. It's kind of like stick building a house versus buying one that already exists. Sometimes it can be more expensive to do the custom made one. The other things that we have to think about when we think of total cost of car ownership, and this is your auto category in your budget, which according to NerdWallet should be between 10 to 20% of your take home pay. I like staying on the lower end of that, particularly if we're going to be talking about carving out a significant portion of our income for saving, investing, or giving. Like you want to keep this low. You've got gasoline. So how much is gas going to cost? It's pretty high right now in the US. You've got your insurance, which you mentioned, the title, tags. If you have to get an inspection on your car every year, it depends on what state you live in as to how often you have to get an inspection done, or maybe you have to get an emissions test done. There's different expenses that will pop up. You have things like replacing your tires, which you'll have to do. You have regular scheduled maintenance on your car. So before you even like step foot in a dealership or go track down a used vehicle and take it for a ride, we want to think about what would the total cost of owning this car actually be. There are some great websites out there for that. Like you can put in like how many miles you think you're going to drive and the make and model of the car, and it will give you a rough guess on how much gas you'll use or how much the insurance will be based on your age. Like we can find a lot of this stuff before you go shopping. And that can give you a great idea of what your window is. Like, what can I afford? What can I not afford? So make sure you've got that number in mind before you start talking to anyone, particularly in a dealership where someone's going to be trying to sell you something. Anything else before we go to the dealership?
No, I think that's great.
Okay. In terms of the financing side, so if we do have to borrow money, you said before that there was a couple of options. You could pay cash. So you've got cash saved up. And you said, this is my budget. I'm going to pay cash for this car. Mm-hmm. We can take out a personal loan. And you mentioned like having a different line of credit. An example of this could be like, you can go to a bank or credit union and just get a personal loan, which you could then use for your car, or you can get an auto loan through a bank credit union. You could maybe have something like a HELOC, so a home equity line of credit on your house, which has an interest rate attached to it. And you have credit cards, which I don't recommend buying a car with a credit card. Bad idea.
Definitely would not recommend that.
But you want to try and maybe think about sorting out your financing before you go to the dealership, right? Or is the dealership the best place to get a loan for a car?
No, and we'll get to it later on in terms of like, how do you negotiate? Coming to the dealership armed with the information of, okay, here's the vehicle that I want. I know it's going to cost this much. I know what it's not going to cost. And I know what the rates I'm qualified for because I've shopped around. That is something that I would highly encourage everybody to do. The more homework you do, the better. The more prepared you're going to be so that if you go to the dealership and you just assume that they're going to give you the best offer, they're not. If they give you an 8% interest rate and you know that you've been shopping around, you can get it for 4.5 or 5, that's a very different position to be in. So, I think it's really important to do the work. And, Google does a really great job. To Rob's point, there's a lot of information online and different sources. There's a lot of auto lenders out there and all trying to do the same thing. So also don't let them take advantage of you either. From my perspective, there's like 6 main ways that I look at in terms of financing options. So you've got 2 ways to the manufacturer. So the manufacturer is like General Motors, Honda, a Toyota, BMW. So they a lot of times have their own financing department. So GM, for example, there's this called General Motors Financing, GMF. So they'll provide their own rates for that. Or if you're buying from the dealership, the manufacturer will also have partnerships with banks. So for example, if you went to a General Motors dealership, you went to a Chevrolet store, you can get financing through the manufacturer's partner, TD, Scotia, RBC, and they'll give preferred rates that way. You can go to traditional banks if you were to just go to the TD auto loans and go that route. Dealerships a lot of times have their own internal financing that they'll offer when the manufacturer doesn't have as good of a rate, or if you're selling for used cars, that's your main option. The independent financing companies, a lot of them are out there. There's a lot of online dealerships now that also offer their own rates, as well as subprime lenders. This is when you have a low credit score. Those are kind of some of the options there.
But essentially, like most dealerships are not a bank. They are a middle person connecting you to someone who is going to provide the loan for this. So if you can skip that person, you probably are potentially skipping like someone taking a cut off of this loan. You should find a better deal elsewhere. Which brings up the question, like, how do dealerships make money? Because I know you've worked in the auto industry itself. Like, how does the auto industry make money at the dealership level?
Yeah. So dealerships will make money. The great thing about new cars for them is they're selling a vehicle, but a lot of times they're getting another vehicle in return. There's someone's trade-in vehicle, the used car. So when they take a vehicle, they're selling a new car, now a used car, and then where they make on the back end is through financing, through extended warranties, through insurance that they sell you, and then the lifetime of the vehicle that they have where they're servicing their vehicle with you, coming in for oil changes, rotating tires, when you get into any predicament where you need maintenance or body work for collisions. So they'll take a percentage, there's a specific they're making a gross value on the vehicle when they sell it to you. And it's important to note that the amount of money that they can make is a lot higher on larger vehicles, luxury vehicles versus small ones. So for example, like a Honda Civic, they're not making as much money off that vehicle. There isn't as much gross there. Whereas in a Cadillac Escalade, they're going to make a lot more money. So that means there's more negotiating room on those types of vehicles as opposed to the really small ones, because it depends on how much they paid for those vehicles in terms for a used car. So that's generally how they make money. And that's kind of the perspective that I wanted you to understand, is that, the dealerships, they want to make money and they have to pay their salespeople, they have to cover their marketing costs, but there is always a situation where you can negotiate if you understand the value of that vehicle and where it sits in the market, because there's a lot of factors I'm speaking to used cars because I assume most high school students can afford or will be affording a used car. There's a lot of things that are taken into consideration in a used car, and the dealerships are aware of that. And there's a lot of work to understand, why does this 2016 Honda Civic with 100,000 kilometers, why is that one worth 22,000 compared to another vehicle that has more or less kilometers? So if you find vehicles that are comparable online, then you understand what that range is going to be. So you'll be more equipped and ready to understand, okay, this is what I know you can sell for. Let's try to negotiate to that.
Okay. And I like that you brought that up, that there's like comparables and then there's different things that they look at. And when it comes to buying used, which I'm guessing is what most of us as teenagers at least are going to be doing, if you're buying new, go you. I hope that's your own money. If you're fortunate enough that you have parents or guardians or grandparents who are chipping in on that, that's great too. Still be a part of the car buying process though. Like, make sure that you are making a decision that's right for you and not just taking a gift of a car that maybe is not right for you. But always make sure you're taking care of it as well. When we think about before, it's kind of like before slash when we go to the dealership, there's this piece of advice out there from Ramit Sethi, who recommends that before you step foot in a dealership, you should identify the car that you want, and then you email all the dealerships, or you call them up and you say, like, this is what I'm looking for. This is my price range. This is the color I want. These are the specs I want, or the trim level I want, and give me your best deal, kind of thing. And before you talk to anyone directly, you let everyone make an offer to you. What do you think of that? Does that actually work?
Yeah. In terms of negotiation, and people always ask, like, how do I get the best offer, the best deal? And there's kind of three ways to do it. The number one way is to shop around for quotes and do the homework and work the dealerships against one another. You want to go to if you're looking for a Honda Civic, and I would urge you to look locally and maybe a little bit further out. It might be worthwhile that, if you're living in a core city where Honda Civics are commonly sold, it's going to be, you'll have more competition. They can then increase the prices because there's more demand, so then less supply. So then the price is going to be higher. Versus if you were out in the countryside and most people drive trucks and nobody wants a Honda Civic because it doesn't help them through their winters, but they happen to have one because they took one as a trade-in, they're going to have a lot harder time selling that Honda Civic versus as if they were in the city. So then you want to look around for those types of places that might be selling those vehicles, who might be more willing to negotiate because they want to sell those vehicles because it's harder for them too. So shopping around for quotes, understanding what people are selling their vehicles for, then gives you really good understanding of, okay, there are 20 Honda Civics around here, so there's a lot of supply actually, and I know that this is a vehicle that I want. Then you're in a better position to negotiate. Versus if this was the only Honda Civic in like 100 miles, then you're going to have a harder time negotiating. So understanding what your options are, what they're willing to give to you, and then who you can work to give you a better offer, that's going to be the best case scenario, because dealerships are trying to make money, but they also want to show volume. They're very competitive in their own markets to show that I've sold the most amount of vehicles, and sometimes they're willing to take a hit on gross if that means they'll increase their volume, especially around certain times of the month or year. Other ways to negotiate is leverage the vehicle that you're trading in. To my previous point of, how dealerships make money, they're making money on the new cars they sell, the used cars that they sell, the things, the extras like warranties that they sell, and then the servicing that they provide. So by leveraging a used car that you're going to give to them, by me saying, I'll sell you my used car in return, now they have, not only are they selling you, this is for when you're buying a new car or buying a newer used car, but you're getting another vehicle to sell as well as mine. So those are the things that you can take into consideration. So they might be able to adjust the value of the vehicle by then taking your trade-in vehicle. And then just, I guess the overall point is to do your homework to know the market value.
And so you mentioned bringing your car in to trade it in. Will you ever get a better deal doing that than you would if you just tried to sell it privately yourself? So say, like, I'm just going to list my car on Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, any of the auto trading sites. Like, would I do better doing that or bringing it into the dealership?
Yeah. Same thing. You got to do your work. A lot of people don't like selling a car, and that's why they go straight to the dealership. There are advantages to going to dealership because I'm not sure about every single state. But in most cases, when you're selling a vehicle, you pay the difference on the tax. At least I know for sure in Canada, that's how it works for us. So I imagine it'll be something similar. So rather, you'd be saving money by selling to a dealership. But in a lot of cases, yes, you would sell more. You would sell your vehicle for more privately. But there are things that are associated to that. You're going to be taking more time. You're doing a lot more work. You're meeting strangers. There's a safety risk in that. And then you're going to be lowballed. People do no-shows. Think about like how you sell things on Facebook Marketplace. A lot of times it's just an uncomfortable like experience. And especially when you are not a car buying professional or selling professional, you don't really know what the true value of your car is. So you're likely going to be lowballed there too. So if you do the work, you take the time, and it will take longer generally than to just go to dealership and sell it, you will generally have a better offer. But sometimes it may not actually be worth it. If it's only a couple $100, is that actually worth 3 months of your time trying to meet up with random people in parking lots? Maybe not. But doing the work is really important, because by understanding what other people are willing to buy your car for, then you can then work. Let's say that you want to buy the Honda Civic from this one store, but then the other store is going to give you $2,000 more for your car. Well, then now you can take that and say, well, I really want to buy this Honda Civic, but this store is going to give me two extra $1,000 for my trade-in vehicle. Well, then you're in a much better negotiating position. So those are the types of things that I would recommend you do.
Okay, so definitely shopping around. One question that's come in is from Ms. Bouquet's class about credit, and that if you are going to a dealership and they are running your credit, it means they're going to do a hard hit to figure out, can you afford the loan that you are trying to take out? Will you be able to make the payments on that? So they'll check your credit score, they'll check your income, they'll check your other debts. So all the stuff that any lender will do before they grant a loan. If you're going to multiple dealerships, you're going to have multiple people running your credit at the same time. Is that okay?
I'll be honest, I'm not an expert on that, so I can't really speak to it, but I can definitely look into it and find out.
Okay. I know a little bit about it, so I wasn't sure how much
great.
you knew about the US system, but in the US, for example, you can shop around for debt. Like if you are shopping around for a house, you should go to multiple lenders within like a same like 2-week to 2-month period. It's very acceptable to have multiple hits on your credit during a small window of time because that shows you're shopping around for debt. Same thing with cars. You can go to multiple dealerships and get them to look at your credit, and it's not going to look very bad. It's not going to be like going to one and then 6 months later going again and 6 months later going again. That can look bad. But if it's all clustered around the same time, that's okay. But you can also go to a dealership, and when you're just shopping around the first time and you're talking to a salesperson or a finance person, like, well, let me just like check your credit, see what we can get you into. Just tell them that's fine, but I only want you to do a soft hit. You have permission to do a soft hit on my credit, not a hard hit. And a soft hit is where they're basically just going to do a surface level look at your credit score. They don't really get to dig very deep, and it does not count as a hard hit on your credit score. So you can let them kind of just have a quick look without going super deep. And then you just let the one that you're really, or two that you're really looking hard at, you'll let them have a deeper look at your credit. So they have to have your permission to check your credit. Make sure you're listening for that. Make sure you're not signing away permission without reading the fine print. Okay. We're at the dealership. We've found a car that we like. Our Miss Worth's class wanted to know, can I take that car, particularly if it's a used car, can I take it on a test drive and stop by my mechanic on the way and let them look at it? Or is that like something I need the permission from the dealership for? Is that like not allowed? Should I be doing that? Or should I trust the dealership if they're putting their stamp on it that it's good? What do you think?
I think it's always great to get a second opinion. It's more recommended to bring that person with you as opposed to taking it to a shop, because what the dealership doesn't want is for something to tinker and then have that be their responsibility, then they're unable to sell the vehicle. That being said, you can ask them, surely you can ask them and maybe they can accompany you, but I don't, knowing the dealerships that I've worked with, they probably would not like that very much. So I would definitely have that conversation with them. I've worked with a lot of really good new car dealerships, franchise stores, meaning GM's franchise their product to their stores. And then just those mom and pop auto cars for cash, types of places. They sometimes don't have a very good reputation for checking the vehicles, for doing a proper check on the condition of the vehicle, doing proper reconditioning. So it's fully fair, and I totally understand why you would feel that way. So I would encourage that you have someone do take a look at it, especially if it's an older vehicle. It's got more than 150,000 kilometers. It's had more than 2 owners. It's had accidents on it that you'll see from a Carfax report. Those are the types of things that I would then encourage you to say, yeah, this might be worth, if I'm spending quite a bit of money, someone to take a look at it. Those are the types of vehicles that we know that's going to have likely going to break down faster or have more problems. So those are, yeah.
You threw out the word a Carfax report. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that is, just in case anyone's not aware?
Yeah, so a Carfax report, it essentially shows you the history of the vehicle and its ownership. It is limited in the amount of information that they give you, but it shows you the history of how many owners it's had, how many accidents that have been reported, safety recalls that you should be aware of, any service records. So the important thing about this is to know when a vehicle has an accident, that's, again, there's people who don't go through their insurance, so that's not recorded. But if it's gone through their insurance, in most cases, if it's $3,000, $5,000 or less, then it's considered okay. It's when a vehicle has more than a $5,000 hit on it, the value of it significantly goes down because there's more likely things to go wrong. It's like if you were to drop your iPhone 20 different times, it's not going to work as well as if you've never dropped it at all. So those are the types of things that you'll get out of Carfax report. People value having vehicles that have only had one owner before, because then if I sold the vehicle to you, you know me, I drive it like this. Whereas if I bought it from someone else and it's this person who drives it like a maniac, didn't take care of it, never took it for oil changes, left it wet and rusted. Like, we don't know these things when there is more than one owner. So those are the types of things that the Carfax will tell you that perhaps the person that you're buying it off of. So this is great in a third-party marketplace. So if you're buying on Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace, you don't know, that person could just be lying to you and saying, no, like, it's never had any accidents because they got it fixed. But if you buy the Carfax report, which is pretty nominal, and sometimes they'll provide it to you if they're a responsible seller, then you'll see this type of information. So anytime you're buying a used car or even trying to sell one, this report is really helpful and valuable. Oh, and another thing is there are a lot of scams online that are trying to sell you a different type of report right now. So if you get a text message saying, I'm looking for this other report, I wouldn't trust it or do your research, but Carfax is like the main place that people go to.
Okay, so Carfax is our gold standard. If you do want to check a car's information, do you just need the VIN number? Is that the only thing you need to do that?
Yes, the VIN.
Okay, so that is the vehicle identification number. It's I don't know how many digits it is, but it's a pretty
17.
long number. 17?
Yeah.
Okay, and it should be on, like, if you're looking at a used car website, you should be able to find it there. Where is it on the car, or typically where can you find it on the car if you're browsing, say, like something off Facebook Marketplace or something like that?
Yeah, you'd be looking on the driver's side, just looking at where the windshield, I never had to explain this. On the driver's side by the very bottom of the windshield in the corner, you'll see it like etched into the very bottom if you look directly in through the glass into the car. So you kind of just lean over from that side mirror in and you'll see it right there at the bottom. Sometimes it's also on the door, but generally they're on the dash there.
Yeah, so you usually find them one of those two places, inside the driver door or on the front dashboard, bottom of the windscreen. And like you said, you don't have to go inside the car to see this. Like if you see a for sale sign on a car on the side of the road, and you're like, oh, this looks interesting. You could stop, take a look at the VIN number, write it down. And then the Carfax report, as you said, there might be a fee attached to that. Like you can search the VIN number up, but to get a detailed report, you will have to pay a small fee. That's how Carfax makes their money for doing all of this research on your behalf. So it could be a good investment before you drop a lot of money onto a vehicle. So consider that before you go. Like a small amount invested now could save you a lot of money later, even though we are in the business of trying to keep it cheaper. Go on.
Dealerships also have access to that. They still have a partnership with Carfax to pull usually either a number or unlimited number of Carfaxes. So if you're buying used car from dealership, they should be providing that to you.
Awesome. Okay, so only other thing I can think of for this particular section question comes from Tommy, and talking about the negotiation with the finance person at a dealership. So you will have a salesperson who will be your kind of person showing you different cars, telling you about their features, taking you on the test drive. And then once you're kind of like, yeah, I think this is the one I want, they send you to the finance person. And what is the finance person's job? And then also, how do we negotiate with them? Because I know you've already mentioned we have the price of the car, but there's not a huge amount of margin for dealerships here. So what else can we negotiate on? And Bailey asked, what do we need to watch out for in terms of what salespeople are going to try and push on us potentially?
Yeah. So first thing, if a dealership process is well-trained, they generally don't have the salesperson who's talking about the vehicle with you. They don't have them talking about numbers. They try to avoid that in that stage. Some really small dealerships don't have a choice and they'll take you all the way through, but generally there's a process. They'll have the salesperson talk to you about the product. They're now called like product ambassadors, and they don't talk about the money. They talk about the money with the finance in the finance or the business office. And that's where they'll talk to you about more specifics in your budget. And this is where the coming really prepared with, here's my budget. I already know how much this car is going to cost. I know that this is what my payment's going to look like. And then they have to show you this purchase agreement. And it's really important to understand the types of fees that you're going to expect here, and then the ones that are non-mandatory. So maybe just to go over quickly the mandatory fees, and it's going to differ by state. Even in Canada, it differs by province, but overall, there's always a shipping or freight cost. And depending on where the vehicle is being built, it will adjust to that. So there's going to be a shipping cost. In Canada, there's something called an AC tax. We pay $100 for that. There's a tire tax for recycling the tires at the end of its life. Something called PDI is pretty prevalent. It's a pre-delivery inspection. So they'll charge for that. Generally includes their cost of getting the vehicle ready. Could include that's actually more for new cars. But the dealership version of this is called a doc fee, DOC fee. It's a documentation fee. It's what they charge to do administration and paperwork. It's generally, that I've found, around $500 to $700. And it could be more if you're buying a luxury brand, especially from a new car. But it's really important to ask them, if it's more than that, to ask them what's included in it, because sometimes they include, your first fuel tank of gas. Like they'll put those things in there, and it's not uncommon, and it's I would put it more on the mandatory side. They all charge it consistently. It just depends on the amount. Sometimes I see someone will bring an invoice for $2,000 in their doc fee, and it's because they added some other things in there. And that's when you know that that's not right. That is something that is not mandatory. So the things that they're going to try to sell you in the business office are generally around warranty, protections, insurance. So these things are extended warranties to extend the life of your warranty. Rust protection is an example. Nitrogen-filled tires, gap insurance, which is an insurance if you were to total the vehicle, it covers the amount, the gap that you did not pay for, if that should happen. Undercoating, which helps with the underside of the vehicle to ensure that rocks and things don't impact the vehicle. VIN etching is something that you'll see sometimes. That's where they remove the VIN from the vehicle, they etch it into the windows for security purposes. All 6 of these are not mandatory. There are things that they sell that might make sense for you. If you live in an area where your car being stolen is a problem, then perhaps VIN etching might be important to you. But for most people, it's not the case. And there's a reason why they have them. I have heard stories where people needed gap insurance and they ran into situations because they didn't have it. But the type of vehicle that you're purchasing, you may not need that, especially if you're buying like an older used car. That's just not important. You're taking a risk on the vehicle either way. And it's also about how you take care of that vehicle yourself. That's going to impact the longevity of it. So just know that when you get there, ask questions. If it doesn't feel right, it's likely not right. And if the math doesn't add up, then you definitely need to ask them to spell it out. Ask them to break down the individual costs on a piece of paper so that the math does make sense for you. And sometimes when they have invoicing and costs associated to things that don't have a name, I highly encourage you ask what those things are, even for just to come at it from your own educational purpose. I think that they'll respect that. And if you tell them, walk in with confidence of, I've done my research, I know this is my budget, I need you to help me get there. They're more likely to work with you if you know what you're doing and you know what you're talking about. But at the same point, if you meet someone who doesn't give you that respect, then I urge you to then speak up for yourself and not work that person, because that person doesn't deserve your business. And that's something I always preach, is if you're going to negotiate in the business office, you should also be ready to walk away.
And I think that's a misconception or a fear of a lot of people, is that, like, I'm walking into a place where I don't know a ton about the auto industry. I'm not like a car expert. I'm buying this thing. There's a lot of words on this paper and that the salesperson's throwing out that I don't really know what they mean. And I'm afraid of looking dumb by asking what they mean, because then I feel like I'll get taken advantage of, because the other person will then assume, this person doesn't know what they're doing. Let's take them for a ride. You're looking for somebody who is going to help educate you through this process. And if they're not doing that, if they're brushing off your questions, be like, you don't need to worry about that. It's not that important. Nobody knows what that means. It's just part of the paperwork. That's a big red flag, and you are at risk of being taken advantage of. You want somebody who will take the time to explain exactly what they're doing, because if they're doing a good job, this should be an equal trade of value. You should be walking out of here feeling like, yep, I got what I want at a right price. And they should feel like, you know what, I made some money on this vehicle. And I got a customer who might come back again in the future for maintenance, repairs, or their next vehicle as well. Like, it should be a win-win situation and not a win-lose one. So make sure you're feeling like that when you walk out, and not feeling like there's something wrong here. Because if there is, listen to your gut and maybe go find a different dealership or ask to speak to a different financing professional. Okay, you mentioned some of the extras like the extended warranty, the gap insurance. The extended warranty one is interesting to me, and Mr. Yoon's class wants to know more about this as well. What is included in like a typical manufacturer's warranty? Do we need extended warranties? And then if you get like a certified used warranty, what does that also include? Like, can you kind of give us a little bit more background on the warranty situation?
Yeah. So when you're buying a new car, it's usually covered for like 5 years or 100,000 kilometers. It's in protection on things like your transmission, on your battery, your engine, things like that are included. An extended warranty is just that additional protection that extends the amount, and it typically covers, cost and repairs that are, or malfunctions or defects that are associated to that. Now there's dealerships will sell additional warranties, especially on their side of things, because they're also going to try to make a little bit more money. And it's on used cars. Once those vehicles are past the 5-year mark and sometimes 10-year mark, obviously they no longer qualify for that warranty. So for some people, if your intention is that you want the vehicle for its entire lifetime, then perhaps extended warranty might be of interest to you. A lot of people have had issues with vehicles that they need repairs for. And now coming into their third or fourth vehicle, they know that for themselves, it's important because where they live, there's a lot of things that can impact the vehicle. So for used cars, again, if you're buying a vehicle that's like $3,000, $4,000, sometimes I'm not sure if that's worth it. I know that just being the case for very used cars, sometimes or in that price range, you're looking at like 200,000 kilometers or miles or above. So those vehicles are quite old. Sometimes it may not actually be worth it to buy that extended warranty for that vehicle.
Yeah, it's you're taking on risk, and the dealership is taking on risk too, and that's where this money's coming from. It's like, how much does the risk of this thing breaking down actually cost? Because how likely is it to happen versus what the cost to fix it will be? That is how any of these systems are going to work. Could you negotiate on it? Like, can you ask for like a reduced price in the extended warranty, since it is more of like a risk play than like they're going to make a definite loss on it? Like, will they negotiate with you on those things?
It depends on their vendor that they're working with. So it'll be dependent on that. So I would definitely ask, but I would also, if you come in to know that, overall, I want to spend $28,000 and they have me at $30,000. Where can I make up that $2,000? Understanding what the value of certain things are can then help you to negotiate. So if you know that you want, those extra floor mats, for example, and those are worth $150, then have that in the back of your mind to know, okay, I can make up for certain things if I can negotiate for that. And I would always ask to see if it is negotiable. I cannot say for certain that they all are, but this is the person to have that right conversation with, and building a connection with them to know that you might be like a lifelong customers and you'll refer them to other people. You write them a positive review. Those are all things that are going to work in their favor to getting more customers as well. So, you want to work that relationship in the best way that you can. You're not coming in there head straight on and trying to have a fight with them. You want to build that relationship and connection as well.
Yeah, I think one of the best arts of negotiation I've read about is where you are inviting the other person to help you solve your problem. And you already kind of said this, like, here's my budget. I really want this car. How can we make this work? And you're inviting them to help you solve your problem. And if you do that, it's going to feel like you're both working towards the same goal instead of working against each other. And you will often both walk out of that feeling a little bit better about the deal. Okay, so we've closed, we've done it. We've bought our car and we're getting ready to leave the dealership or the private sale, whatever it was. What are your recommendations for after we've purchased a car? Things that we should do in terms of maintenance, taking care of it? Are there any additional costs or things we need to sign up for that maybe we don't get out of a dealership? So is there anything else that we can do afterwards that would be worth knowing about?
Yeah, definitely doing your oil changes, your regular maintenance. A lot of people don't read their owner's manual. I highly encourage that you do read it. Understand, how much air should be in your tires. Sometimes people overinflate or underinflate their vehicle, which affect the longevity of your tires, and then means that you're more likely to have to replace them a lot sooner. So understanding, your vehicle in that sense, is really important. Also getting to understand like how your car drives, how it sounds, how it feels, because then you'll also know when a rattle comes up that's not normal. And I would encourage you to generally, you want to take care of the small things before they turn into big things. And you don't want to wait until it becomes a big thing, because it's going to be a large fix, or you're going to have to buy a new vehicle. So taking care of them and understanding those things are really important. Getting an oil change, changing your cabin air filter, that's for your own, purely your own safety as well. Those are just like air filters that for the air that's coming into your vehicle, those are relatively easy to fix. You can look up videos online on how to change those. You can do those things yourself at home too. Changing your windshield wipers, you can get those from Costco. Like there's a lot of things you can do in terms of maintenance for your vehicle. Yeah, those are kind of like the things I would generally recommend. Understanding how to jumpstart your car, making sure you have some sort of safety pack. Like if you live in a place where there's a lot of snow, like where I live, you want to have a winter safety kit that includes things like a blanket and so on and so forth. So understanding how to maybe understanding like the different ways to like understand your battery, how to change a battery, but that's not as important. But there is one thing, it's called a VIN decoder. Sorry, it's a, the name escapes me, but it's a little machine that you attach to your car and it's going to give you all the codes of that connects to the computer in the vehicle. I'll remember it. But essentially you plug it in and it's going to tell you all the different things that are happening in the vehicle and then what are the wrong things. So if you go to any type of auto body shop, I don't know what the American version of a Canadian Tire is, Rona doesn't have a body shop, do they? Anyways, but those type of places, they'll have that for you. So if something's wrong with your vehicle, they'll plug it in for you and they'll decode to tell you what is wrong with the vehicle. You can get one of those things yourself. They're not that expensive. You can get them from Amazon even, and those things can help you with the longevity of your vehicle when you better understand them. That being said, you're not going to be fixing them, but for some people, it's important for them to have it. Also, if your vehicle's a lot older and your battery is older, definitely having some sort of something to jumpstart your car is going to be important. They now sell portable ones rather than having to, then that way you don't need another vehicle there to boost your vehicle when your battery dies. That's a really cool one that I've had to use before when I got stuck. So if you're doing long drives, long distances, those are things that I would consider.
And I hope all of you are listening to this and you're thinking of it in terms of a lens of personal finance. Like these are maintaining the things that you have so that you can make them last longer and not have to replace them as soon or have these big fixes coming up. We have our emergency fund so that when these small things come up, you're not afraid to go to the dealership and go get it fixed. You're like, yep, I got emergency funds, exactly what this is for. I don't need to not go because I don't currently have the money to go. You have things that will need to be replaced, and looking at your owner's manual will help you with that. Like you can see at 60,000 miles, I'm going to have to do all of these different things for maintenance. So I need to budget for that. I know tires will last X number of years, depending on the type of tire you get. So let's plan to replace that every however many years, divided by into the cost. And you should be putting that amount of money aside each month. My wife and I have an auto maintenance budget. Like our car doesn't need to be fixed every single month, but we know we spend roughly this amount on maintaining our cars every year. So we put that aside every month. And then when we need to maintain our cars, it's there. So it's not even an emergency at that point. The other stuff, like what can you have in your car with you that can help reduce the risk of costs coming from emergencies? Weather-related kits, having a spare tire that's actually in good shape, or a donut tire is a great one. Having an air compressor in the car to fill up tires if you happen to need one, or a jump start assistance device would be great. The decoder thing sounds really cool. When you send me the name of that, I'll put in the description, or I'll put at least a name of it on the video.
It's an OBD2 scanner. I've sent it to you. I sent it into the channel there.
OBD2 scanner. I will add that into the notes as well. All right. Any other final questions? Oh, you got something you want to add in? Nope. If you have questions when you're watching, please put those in. Would love to answer those for you.
I do have one really important note that I want to talk about, which is something called negative equity as like a last note. And this is something that you'll hear at the dealership. Essentially, your car is worth less than what it's worth. If you're financing the vehicle, you might be in a position where you have negative equity, meaning if something were to happen to your car or you were trying to sell it for $30,000, your car is actually only worth $20,000. You will have a negative equity of $10,000. Essentially, you'll have to pay that money back. And this is the type of position that I want to urge you to try to not be in. There are many reasons as to why this could be, and it could be depreciation. Your car is now worth a lot less than what the value is, and that's why for some people leasing is good for them, especially on luxury cars. High interest rates that impact how much interest you're paying that might have bumped you over. Having really long loan terms. Dealerships are going to offer you something called they're going to try to give you the lowest payment. When they give you the lowest payment, it's usually the longest term, meaning 84 months. That's 7 years. And having a long loan term means that you're at a higher chance of being in a negative equity position because you're paying more interest over time. And although that gives you the lowest payment, a lot of people will go to that because, okay, when I can get the car for $300 a month, but if you were to actually just bump up to $500 a month, you won't be in a negative equity position when you go to sell the vehicle. So it also depends on like what you're using the for. And again, to our very first point of like understanding how long you're going to have the vehicle is going to impact, whether you even need to think about this negative equity stuff. High mileage, or if you damage the vehicle pretty excessively, that's obviously going to affect the value of your vehicle. You overpaid for it, so you don't want to overpay for it because then when it hits the normal level of depreciation, it's actually not worth as much because you overpaid an extra $5,000 for it. Or if you already have negative equity and you're trying to buy a new car, the dealership and the banks, they'll roll over your negative equity into that new deal, so they'll just give you a higher payment, but you're in another negative equity position. So if you were to do the math on a $25,000 loan at a 4% interest rate and a 4-year versus a 7-year loan, your monthly payment on a 4-year loan is going to be $524, and the 7-year loan is $346. So surely I would much rather pay $346 a month, but your total interest charges are going to be from $2,300 to almost $4,000. So you're actually going to be paying more overall. So it's important to understand, why that's important to you, but also be aware that negative equity is a real thing, and I don't want you to be in a position like that.
Yeah. And like car loans for 7 years, when you look up the average length of time that most Americans at least keep their car, it's less than 5 years. So if you're taking a loan out for 7 years, but most people's cars aren't lasting beyond 5, you're now going to have this extra 2 years where you've got a debt to pay off still, but you have no asset. You have no car left that goes with that. So you're going to have to, like you said, roll it into the next debt. So now the next car you get is already starting at a lower point in terms of debt than you were previously. So it's a hard position to be in. If you do have to finance a car, which we don't really recommend, like a car loan is not the best type of debt to have because you're financing something that is going down in value. A car can help you to earn money. So it can help you to bring in income, or it can be an asset if you're using it for your job, like delivery, or you're renting it out on something like Turo. But in general, this is not something that is going to be a cornerstone of your financial wealth. And until you're in a position where you have your emergency fund set up, your future is kind of in place and rolling, your car shouldn't absorb a huge amount of your income, and it certainly shouldn't be a high percentage of your debt if possible. So everyone is different. Everyone's situation is different, but if you do have to finance, please try and keep it as low as possible and allow you to have that cash flow for doing the other fun things in life too. All right. Before we wrap up, I have one question that I ask every guest who comes on. What is your number one piece of advice for teens when it comes to building wealth?
Can I do more than one?
Of course. We'll keep it under 100 though.
I'm sure if they've heard it from you already, but start building credit as soon as possible. You have a history, and then being responsible with that credit, getting your license as soon as possible. If to have a clean driving record is going to help your insurance rates, and invest early, as in like right now, in any things that Rob, I'm sure you've been teaching your community with.
That's awesome. Yeah. So we had start building your credit now, get that driver's license as soon as you can so that you can start building a responsible driving history, which I haven't heard before. That's a really good piece of advice. The credit one we have heard before, but you know how important it is. So many of our guests have talked about that. Even though we are not encouraging you to borrow huge sums of money, if you do need to borrow, let's get the best rate when we do it, so we're paying the least amount of interest. Any tips for how teens can build credit?
Yeah, getting that credit card is really important. Finding one that you're responsible, finding a budget that you're responsible, and then making sure you have a good routine in paying off that credit card. I used to work for a bank and I used to sell credit cards, and a lot of them were students. And the reason why I wanted them to do it was so that they could start building credit, even if you were buying a coffee and then paying off that $5 coffee. So those things are really important. That's going to help you with your credit. And then for me, what I just recently learned by increasing the amount of credit availability that I have, it adjusts for, you're going to answer this a lot better. You're going to explain this a lot better, but I'm only using 30% of my credit availability now. So that means that helps with my credit score. I'm not sure what the official term is for that, but that could be something that could help you moving forward as well. by increasing your limits and
Yes,
whatnot.
it's your credit usage. So you can ask your credit card company after you've demonstrated, a period of time of making your payments on time, you can ask them for more credit. So that is, your credit card would have a higher limit, an amount you can borrow. So that means if you're still spending, $30 a week on gas, $30 out of a 1,000 credit limit is very different to $30 out of a $5,000 credit limit. You're using a lower percentage of it, which just looks better for your credit score. The big thing with credit, though, as Vivian said, is you have to do it responsibly. It has to be part of your budget. You're not borrowing money that you do not have. So we're buying a coffee, we're buying gas, we're paying our cell phone bill with it, something that you're like, I was doing this anyway. I have the money for it. Let me put it on credit. Let me pay it off, when the statement comes due, and I'm not paying any interest on this credit card. We should not be paying interest on our credit cards. And that is how you will build credit responsibly. First credit card, if you are under 18, it might be as an authorized user on a parent's or a guardian's credit card. Make sure that you both are going to be responsible with that. Once you turn 18, you can get your own one. I recommend starting with secure credit cards. That's where you send the bank some money and you basically borrow from yourself until you've demonstrated an ability to pay it back. And then they upgrade you to a regular one and send you your deposit back. But that's a great way to start and kind of reduce the risk that you're going to make mistakes, or you allow mistakes to happen, but they're not going to really destroy your credit. All right, Vivian, thank you so much for coming today. This was a really great talk, a lot of information in here about buying cars. If you have any further questions for us, make sure you leave it in the comments on the YouTube video. We'd be happy to answer those for you. But if people want to reach you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can visit us at www.makingautoeasy.com. We're also pretty active on social media on Instagram at Making Auto Easy. And there we have videos very consistently about car buying tips and hacks and a lot of information that I bring from my own experiences. And I also have a full car buying guide on our website. If you go to makingautoeasy.com, it's like a 15-page document of all the things that I would recommend, things that we've covered in this call in more detail.
And you can find that guide linked in the description of the video if you're watching on YouTube. But yeah, make sure you're adding, Making Auto Easy to your YouTube subscriptions. Make sure you hit subscribe to Fi Educator as well, so you can see when we have more guest speakers coming in the future. Thank you so much for being here today. Vivian, thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks so much.